Bhagavate Vasudevaya. You've been signed out because your account is signed in from another device. Give me a thumbs up today. Okay, you can hear me? Okay. All right, we are at the tail end of the 4th chapter. I believe we're on text 39. Well, what's been covered thus far? Let's move so I can see you. You I can see. Now I can see everybody. What's been covered thus far? And why don't you sit over here so I can see you? If I was going to give a real quick recap. Bell, please. Shh. Shanti on the bell. That's it. Let it ring in your heart. Thank you. If I was going to recap the 4th chapter real succinctly, I would say that no bell. Hold it silently. Thank you. Please don't make me ask you again. I would say that Krishna begins by really introducing himself as God for the first time in the Gita. He indicates he's super knowledgeable, even omniscient, because he remembers everything which has ever happened throughout, many appearances, whereas Arjuna does not. It's a little different than saying, I know everything. Being all-knowing or omniscient is sarvagya in Sanskrit. Krishna stops just short of saying that. He also indicates he's incredibly powerful. Tadatmanam srijamyaham. I manifest myself, yuge yuge, yuga after yuga, to dharma samstapana, to establish dharma. So he indicates he's incredibly powerful. He also indicates his benevolence. He appears to protect the sadhus and paritranaya sadhanam, to deliver the sadhus really, and to the saintly people, and to curb the miscreants. Vinashai shaduskritam. So Krishna starts off the 4th chapter by introducing himself in no uncertain terms as God, which is really an evolution in the text. There have been some foreshadowings within every chapter, from the 1st chapter through the 3rd chapter, but not like a bold-faced, plain statement of Krishna's divinity, the way you get in the beginning of the 4th chapter. That being done, really, other than Krishna doing that, he hasn't really made much of that. That information, although it's something which the Gita, in a helix-like fashion, going over the same information again and again, giving newer and newer details. Although that's been happening, it's not that this information that Krishna's God is immediately usable by the reader of the Gita. Because what Krishna chooses to focus on is that he created the universe, but somehow or other still remains aloof from it. And although he created the universe, he's still the akartru. He's still the non-doer, despite having created the whole universe. And what Arjuna is supposed to learn from that is that he can also be in this world, but not become implicated in it. So, and Krishna says, just like many saints have done throughout time. So if many saints have done that throughout time, then you don't actually need God setting the example. If Gandhi could set the example, or if some other person could set the example, then what's the benefit of Krishna setting an example of someone being unattached? Any sadhu, any spiritual person would do for teaching that lesson. It's like if somebody says, I have a PhD in, advanced mathematics, and today I'm going to teach you basic arithmetic, which could be taught by anybody. Do you follow? Then what's the benefit? You don't need that person. You don't need that high level of qualification. And so it's almost as if Krishna's throwing that out there. You'll take him seriously. But the message he's been giving thus far in the Gita is pre-theistic in a lot of ways. And even when he says, that my Janma and karma is divya, is transcendental, and if you know this in truth, evam yo veti tatpataha, then you won't take birth again in this world. That his karma and Janma are transcendental could almost be said of any spiritual person, because the example he's setting is acting in this world, but not acting. You follow? The specific thing he says about himself. Kartaram api mam vidya kartaram avyayam. Know that although I am the doer, I am still the non-doer. So although I'm the doer, you should know I'm the non-doer, because he's acting in this world but not being attached. And he says, okay, so now I'm going to teach you about karma and vikarma and akarma, and that's all the sages have done this, and you should do this too. So the first, let's say, 20 verses of the Gita are Krishna introducing himself as God, but that knowledge isn't particularly important yet, because what you're supposed to take away from Krishna is that he's in this world but not of it. He's doing his duty but he's not attached. He's doing his duty but not attached. That's also stated by Krishna himself, true about all spiritually minded people and all saintly people, and you should follow that example, the example of Krishna, which is also the example of all saintly people. In which case Krishna seems quite overqualified for the lesson that's being taught. And sometimes when somebody's overqualified for a job, they don't get the job. Like, it's not even like, well, they'll do a better job. Sometimes being overqualified is actually a deficit. If you've got God setting an example of doing your duty but not being attached, well, he's omnipotent, so he can get away with that. He's omniscient, so there's no possibility of him getting bewildered. And so in that sense, being overqualified might actually be a deficit, because you can't relate to Krishna because he's so distinct from you. You'd almost be better off with the example of someone down the street who was able to do their duty but be unattached. You want to jump off a cliff. There's some cliffs in Newport Beach my kids like to jump off of. So you want to go jump off a cliff. Somebody, I'll teach you how to jump off the cliff. And like, I'm an Olympic diver. I have a gold medal from the Olympics. But it's really simple. Let me show you how easy it is. That may not encourage you that you can jump off the cliff, because they're so qualified. Of course they can do it. Maybe you still can't do it. You follow? Nonetheless, I think what happens in the Gita is that Krishna is seeding our hearts and opening up the discussion that he's God. And that will become extremely relevant later on when he tells us to be devoted to him and to serve him in perpetuity, and that by his grace we'll achieve heaven, and so on and so forth. That information about his divinity, superlative divinity, as a cause of all causes, it becomes more relevant as we go on. As we go on. Okay, so then Krishna takes the idea of yajna, which was introduced in the 3rd chapter. Please listen very carefully. I've just been warming my head up. I've been fixing a sink for the last few hours, changing a valve, and so I'm getting my head back in the game. This is extremely pertinent. What I said previously is faithful to the chapter, but it's not surgically pertinent to today's class and the verses we're going to go over today. What I'm saying now is absolutely essential. And so listen very carefully. Krishna started out in the 2nd chapter by telling us that we're not the body. Once you have that knowledge, then that changes your behavior. It's a cognitive behavioral model. Once you understand you're not the body, then you won't be so attached when you're doing your duty. There could be other ways to get unattached when you're doing your duty. You could be an atheist, but you could realize that there are so many variables you can't control for, and the only variable you can control is your own actions, and therefore you're satisfied doing your duty, and you don't worry about what the results are. There are atheistic ways to get to this idea, but Krishna introduces a theistic way, or at least a pre-theistic way to get to it. You're not the body, and therefore the things of this world aren't the end-all, be-all of your existence. I mean, like if you have a boyfriend and you lose your boyfriend, it's like the worst thing in the world. You like want to like poke your eyes out and just like lose your mind. But if you knew that you were going to have thousands and millions of boyfriends, and you had a moment where you realized that you'd had billions, trillions, and quadrillions of boyfriends and girlfriends and husbands and wives and partners and everything under the sun, what would happen to your situation in that moment if you stopped microscoping in and getting like ridiculously hyper myopic, and you just telescoped out and you saw, oh wait a second, the star I was infatuated with, there's gazillions of stars, undecillions of stars that just like it. It would change things, and you become way less hung up and way less freaked out. It's just not possible to stay myopic when you see the big picture. I think in some ways, and I'm tangenting off, I think in some ways our forgetfulness, rather than being a curse, you could say, why does Krishna make us forget? It's the only way you'd still have free will, because if you didn't forget, free will would be nullified, because your knowledge of what was going on lifetime after lifetime would become quickly oppressive to the point where you would no longer be able to do the wrong thing, because you'd be able to see this cause and effect so absolutely crystal clearly there'd be no room left for you to choose. I actually think the one lifetime model where you forget everything, but your karma goes with you, and you can understand the principle of what's going on without necessarily all the details, is really the only model that would allow for free will, and an all good God would allow for free will, because it's a better world where we have the freedom to choose love than a world where we are automatons and we don't have that freedom. Okay, so anyway, Krishna started off and said, you're not the body. Therefore, do your duty and don't be attached. Arjuna couldn't quite wrap his head around that. And so Krishna said, okay, just do your duty and be attached. What is it called when you do your duty? That means it's regulated. That means it's not whimsical, because it's your duty, which indicates that it's something beyond your mere whimsy. We have to determine how to get to duty. That's another conversation. But you do your duty, which indicates it's not whimsical. It's not happenstance. It doesn't change moment to moment. But you're attached. But you're doing your duty. You're behaving appropriately. What's that called? Yes. That's called yajna. When Krishna introduces yajna in the 3rd chapter, it's to demigods. It's for your own enjoyment. So he's taken a step back from the 2nd chapter. But it's connected to the Veda, and the Vedas are connected to Akshar, the undecaying one, and that means you're connected in some way to a higher principle. Just like if a fruit is connected to a tree, it will ripen, and so now you're connected to something above yourself, and you're not merely living your life in vain. Therefore, yajna is a step back from the more advanced teaching that Krishna gave in the 2nd chapter. Now in the 3rd chapter, Krishna evolves our understanding of the word yajna, and it goes beyond the Vedic sacrifice, which is a way of ritually initially when Krishna introduced yajna, it was the fire sacrifice where you take some of your bounty and ritually offer it into the fire, inconveniencing yourself and following a set of rules. It was a rite. It was a ritual act, like tithing. Tithing is a tenth. It's a standard practice of giving a tenth of your wealth to charity. Yajna was tithing. It was going to church on Sundays, would be roughly what it was equivalent to, and putting a donation in the, it looks like a bedpan. It's a weird thing. I don't know why. You know what I mean? That tray they pass around, it bizarrely looks like a bedpan. I don't know what the thought process behind that was. I think it's because of the money that goes in and it kind of like goes under the lip, so people are less likely to reach in and grab money out of it. It becomes a little bit more of an like a difficult, onerous endeavor to get money out. But it looks like a toilet seat, and the inside looks like a bedpan. For those of you who've been to church and tithe, and I'm sure that there's been a church somewhere in America in the last 100 years that has used a bedpan in lieu of a tray because they just couldn't find when they didn't have the Christian paraphernalia store down the corner, and they had to make do. Same thing in Brazil today. That same tray. Yeah. So anyway, that concept of yajna, which initially was very ritual, it's an actual fire sacrifice. You build a fire, you throw things into the fire, give away your wealth, chant mantras. It's a full ritual rite, and it involves charity. That's a big part of yajnas. Remuneration to the priests, huge thing. So you're tithing, no question about it. Sometimes you're even doing more than tithing. Right? Sometimes you're giving 50, 80, 100% of your wealth. If you look at the way yajna is conceived in the Vedic text, kings had to give away all of their wealth to perform it. That's how it was introduced in the 3rd chapter. And it was, you had desires, but at least you were regulated. It evolves in the 4th chapter. And you start saying you should do things only for the purpose of yajna, which actually was already introduced in the 3rd chapter. Yagyartad anyate yatra loko yam karma bandhana. You're already told that any work you do in this world that's not for the purpose of yajna will bind you. But then Krishna quickly goes on to tell you to do it and enjoy and prosper, and so it's very clear that it's meant for people who can't wrap their head around the detachment, which was there in Krishna's initial lesson. In the 4th chapter, Krishna comes back around, and he gets back to what he wants to really talk about. And now you're doing work just for the purpose of yajna. And he said, Yagyaya charta karma, Yagyaya acharta karma, sarva kilbisham. Yagyaya charta karma samagram praviliyate. Excuse me. It doesn't destroy all your doubts. If you are jnana vastita cetasa, if your mind is situated in knowledge, yagyaya charta karma, and you do your work only for yagya. So jnana, knowledge, yagya, and karma, all 3 words in one verse. Not as separate paths, but all as part of the one path. Yagya, jnana vastita cetasa, your mind is situated in knowledge, and yagyaya charta karma, all of your works are done for the purpose of yajna. Then samagram pravilite, everything becomes merged in transcendence. And then Krishna goes through a number of different things that people were doing in and around India in spiritual circles, from pranayam to fasting, to meditation, to getting married, to being monks, to performing physical austerities, sitting in cold water in the wintertime, sitting next to a fire in the summertime, etc., etc. India is the land of such far out austerities. And then studying, scriptural study, worshiping of the demigods, meditating on oneness, and he terms all these things yajna, broadening our conception from the Vedic rite that involved tithing to now all of the spiritual actions which went on along the spiritual landscape of ancient India. And he says all of these things are yajna. They all purify you. And then he makes a distinction, creates a hierarchy. Dravya maya yajna, the sacrifice of mere possessions, is less than jnana maya yajna, the sacrifice which is filled with knowledge. In other words, we should do the right thing for the right reason. And just accidentally doing the right thing is not the same as very purposefully doing the right thing for the right reason. Doing the right thing, to give you a rough example, I was giving class, I was talking about veganism 20 years ago. Someone came into class and said, I'm a vegan. I thought, that's great, so I'm glad to hear that. Why are you a vegan? I thought, well, it's like part of the tribe, it's like give them the mic. I said, when I was abducted by aliens, they told me I should be. And I was in my 20s. I said, I'm not going to endorse that because I don't know what else the aliens told you. And if I jump on your bandwagon because you happen to be agreeing with me today, what's going to happen when you disagree with me by the same logic that the aliens told me to? So we got to do the right thing for the right reason. Otherwise, we're running the risk if we're doing the right thing today and the wrong thing tomorrow. So, Krishna introduces yajna, and he introduces it as an option if you're not ready for the detachment of the initial teachings on buddhi yoga that he gave. And it's ritual and it's tithing. He then circles back to the idea of doing something only for yajna. In other words, imagine somebody only went to church every day, only gave money to the church, and had no other life. It wasn't tithing and regulating themselves. They went to church every day, and they gave all their money. And then Krishna circles back to that, which gets you back to the same place. Because if you start out by sometimes doing the right thing for the right reason, regulated, in due course of time, you'll start doing the right thing more often. And there'll be this upward mobility, and things will tend to feed on themselves and get better and better. Like if you exercise increases executive function. Executive function psychologically includes things like impulse control. So if you exercise, it increases your ability to control your impulses and do the right thing, which then leads you to be more regulated in your exercise. In your exercise. And it has this spiral effect where one thing helps the other. So if you start doing the right thing and following the Veda and tithing and giving on Sundays, pretty soon you're like, well, how come I don't do this? Maybe I should do it on Fridays too. Maybe I should do this on Tuesdays also. Maybe I should give 20% instead of 10%. And you start to, and you find people doing this. You guys know John D. Rockefeller? You don't know who John D. Rockefeller is? Standard Oil? I'm looking at you. You don't. Okay, you guys don't know. I'm like blown away that you don't know this. I think you have to give back. I think you have to take an Israeli citizenship now and give up your U.S. citizenship. John D. Rockefeller was like the richest man in the world. He, practically speaking, single-handedly made oil accessible to the masses of people around the world in the 1870s. He was fabulously wealthy. The richest man in the world. And he made oil 20 times less expensive. So people didn't have, it used to be, people had to go to sleep at night because there was no lights and that was it. And so you were done. If you lived in the city, you couldn't build a fire and you couldn't see all over your house, and so you had to just go to sleep, and only rich people could afford oil lamps or electricity. And oil lamps could either consist of refined oil, crude oil refined, and then not gasoline, but oil, kerosene, excuse me. And the other option was, it's a petroleum product, but it's kerosene. And the other option was whale oil, which got more and more expensive because the whaling, the heyday of whaling was in the early 1800s. By the end of the 1800s, they depleted a lot of the world's resources of whales, and so they had less whale blubber to turn into oil to heat homes and to light homes. But Rockefeller made it so that anybody could light their home for a penny an hour, and it was ridiculously cheaper than whale oil and even electricity. And the whole country was able to get lit. Then he even did it in Europe, and they found the biggest oil reserves in the world in Uzbekistan, and he still beat them on price because he bought forests and used those for the trees. And he had smelting plants to make the steel rings, and he made the steel rings thinner than they normally were, so they cost less money. And he found, there's 10% gasoline came out of it, and tar came out of it, which is normally thrown in the river by all the other oil refiners because all they wanted was the kerosene. But he found uses for the gasoline, and he found uses for the tar. He paved roads, and instead of hiring plumbers, he had in-house plumbers, and he made really the first worldwide vertical operation, and was able to bring down the price from like $5.50 a barrel, like I don't know what it was, 8 cents a barrel, something insane, or $5.50 a gallon. I can't remember what it was. $5.50 a barrel down to like 8 cents a barrel at a certain point. It was incredible how cheap he got it. And it wasn't 8 cents a barrel. I can't remember what the price was, but he brought it down to 1/20th of what it normally cost. And he was incredibly successful. He was also a mega Christian. Went to church multiple times a week, gave millions and millions of dollars, gave I think $550 million upon his death to various Christian charities. He was brilliant. I mean, he would only give to charities that actually did stuff. And so if you did stuff and got stuff done, then he would give you money. If you didn't, then you get one gift from him, you wouldn't get more. And so even his same business mentality worked its way into the reason why I gave you the weekend off was he used to give people time off whenever they needed it and pay for their time off. There's letters from him saying take as much time as you need off, and so people were motivated to get back to work. They didn't want to take advantage of him. He was a revolutionary businessman, but he was a mega Christian, and he just kept giving more and more as time went on, until eventually on his deathbed he gave away the majority of his wealth. People do this. They just give away huge amounts of their money. Sometimes they get motivated. They enjoy the gift of giving. So Krishna's kind of rolling with this. If you tithe and if you do yajna, even if it's for your own sake, if at least you get regulated and you don't waver when things get difficult, that will have an upward spiral effect, and eventually you'll be doing everything for the purpose of yajna. And Krishna wants to be a little broad-minded as a spiritualist. It's kind of wild. The days are like, I am the way, the truth, and the light. And no one goes back to the Father except through me. Thousands of years before that, here's Krishna weighing in and saying, here are all these different things people are doing in different communities around us. They're all yajna. And if you're doing the right thing for the right reason, that's the magic. You follow? Okay. How did I do there, Darshan? Speak.
Oh, I thought it was really good. I thought it tied everything together really well.
Had you asked me the question you asked me after class last week, I would have been able to do this during the pertinent class instead of having to go back and hit it again. But we nailed it, right? What we discussed?
Yeah.
So Dale, how'd that do for you?
Yeah, I think it was very valuable because at least my understanding of yagya in last class had diminished once you had taught us that this was supposed to be for people who couldn't do something higher. So then I was a little disappointed by the value that yagya could bring us in our spiritual journey. But then now realizing that Krishna is coming back around and you highlighting all the ways in which he's doing that elevated my understanding of yagya again. So that was very valuable.
Think about it like this. You were raised Catholic, right?
Yes.
Think about it like this. You could say you should go to Mass one day a week. And then you could say to somebody, your entire life should become one Mass. You follow? You should take the Eucharist every week. And then you could say, actually, you should only eat Eucharist every day of your life. And you could say to somebody, you should confess and live in a state of grace at least once a week. Or you could say, actually, every moment of your life should be a confession. Every moment of your life should be lived in a state of grace. You follow? And so you have to look at the multivalence of the term yajna and how it's used in a very specific way to refer to the Vedic sacrifice. But Krishna himself, in the Sanskrit text of the Gita, widens the usage of the term yajna to include a wide variety of spiritual acts and point out how when something's done for yajna, it's being done for the right reason. And so if you increase the percentage of that, then we're back to where we were in the second chapter where you're doing, and really it's a little more. We're back to where we were in the second chapter, but in the second chapter, what was absent? Do your duty, but don't be attached to the results. It's your duty, so it's the right reason.
Oh, for a higher purpose.
Yeah, there's a God now. Yajna is done to someone. And so it's like if you're doing yajna, it's like who's the yagyapati? Who's the person who is the recipient of the yajna? Krishna eventually says, Aham hi sava yajnanam bhokta cha prabhurevacha. I'm the master and enjoyer of all yajna. This comes up repeatedly in the Gita. And so when you bring up the idea of yajna, sacrifice for a higher purpose, it starts to become sacrifice to somebody, which was not there in the second chapter. And so in this way you can see that Krishna's information that he gave initially in the fourth chapter, although not so useful right away, we're eventually getting to where it was very useful at this stage in the chapter. Initially, Krishna was just a spiritual person who was doing their duty unattached. But now as you start to think about yajna and doing everything as yajna, it starts to make you think, who am I doing that for? It also is attached to the Veda, which wasn't so much there in the second chapter. It was almost like what Krishna was saying was like against the Veda. He says, Triguna Vishaya Veda Nishtragunya Bhavarjuna. He speaks disparagingly about the Veda Vada Ratas, the people who are too attached to the Vedas, and the Bhogaishwarya Prasaktanam Samadhi Navitiyate, that Samadha Navitiyate, that they won't achieve Samadhi because they're too attached to enjoyment, be transcendental to the Vedas. But now there's this portion of the Vedas which talks about yajna and higher purposes, and that you can become attached to, and that you can become regulated by. Did you follow all this, or did you space out? You're not smart enough to space out in my classes. Learn to focus. Did you guys follow this? I'm going to say it again, real quick. Yajna was introduced as an option if you couldn't do the detached duty of the second chapter. It was tithing and ritual. But Krishna broadens his usage of the term yajna. I'm not doing this. Krishna does this with the term yajna in the third and fourth chapters. He introduces himself as God, which isn't so relevant, but he gets back to yajna, and now your whole life becomes a yajna. You're doing the right thing for the right reasons all the time. And he also broadens what might be considered to be yajna. And all sorts of spiritual stuff could be considered to be yajna. Could fighting in a battle be considered to be yajna? He never directly says it. But he comes damn close. He says, some people sacrifice the senses and the fire of the senses. And at the end of the chapter, he says, Uttishta, get up. What does he say? Yoga stau. Situate yourself in yoga. Stand up. Sangshaya chinna, asina, atmana. Cut down your doubts with the sword of knowledge. He speaks in martial language at the end of the chapter. But he doesn't quite say to Arjuna, your yajna is to fight. But he does tell him, fight, do it for me, be my instrument, you will be successful, I will see to it. He does say that. And I think he leads us to a place where we can see, oh yeah, anything in your life could be yajna. I think by not making it so specific about the battle, Krishna leaves it a bit more open-ended, which gives it more value to us. There might have also been some sense in which he didn't want to broaden the term's meaning so much as to make it cognitively meaningless as a specific term. And so although he was able to, was willing to include all sorts of spiritual things and general ideas, he didn't want to just say, and fighting is yajna. It kind of like devalues the term yajna in some ways. Anyway, these are just some thoughts I had. So we're on text 39 now. We're warmed up. A faithful man who's dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses is eligible to achieve such knowledge. And having achieved it, he quickly attains the supreme spiritual peace. But ignorant and faithless persons who doubt the revealed scriptures do not attain God consciousness. They fall down. For the doubting soul, there's happiness neither in this world or the next. These two verses sound really Christian to me. And I'm a recovering Christian. And so I get to hate on Christians because I grew up Christian. was baptized and all that jazz. And so I get to have whatever opinions I want. Because I'm one of them. It's not bigoted. It's me critiquing my own tribe. That said, I don't think I'm not critiquing all of Christianity. But this language of have faith because it says so in the Bible, otherwise you'll go to hell. I don't find this such preaching to be persuasive. I don't teach people like that. I find that people who are convinced by teachings like that are usually pretty stupid. And usually when you look at their life, you don't need to look at the book anymore. You've looked at the book enough. And so I usually find that when people are convinced by such non-arguments, they have a bunch of other wacky ideas about the nature of the world that are similarly poorly reasoned. There's so many assumptions. It says so in the Bible. So you're assuming I accept the Bible as a divinely revealed scripture. But if I accepted the Bible as a divinely revealed scripture, I'd already be a Christian, and you wouldn't be trying to convince me. So now you have to tell me why I should accept the Bible. You can't assume I accept the Bible. You have to tell me why. Well, you have to have faith. So faith really means blind obedience to. But then why do I have a faculty of knowledge? Why do I ask for evidence for anything? Why aren't we doing Salem witch trials? You know? It's like sometimes with the witch trials, not that many people actually got killed. Right? Like 15 people in Salem got killed in the witch trials. It's got way exploded up in people's minds. Probably make a great movie. I don't think there's been a real blockbuster movie. Of course, it's such a macabre subject. Who's going to want to do it, right? A full rip on Christianity. And it's like a real negative chapter in this country's history. But anyway. Okay, so I think you're a witch. Okay, well, let's drown her. If she doesn't die, it means she's a witch. Then we're going to kill her. If she does die, she's innocent. But where's the version where you're innocent and you don't die? Right? You follow? The Greeks figured this stuff out. It's like the ancient Egyptians figured this stuff out. We're cave dwellers, like Neanderthals. Meanwhile, there's the Goswamis are writing their literature, and here we are burning people at the stake because somebody said, they're witches. Who even came up with this stuff, It was up north. There wasn't even any witchcraft going on. It wasn't down south where there was slaves down there doing some version of shamanic culture out of Africa. Where are we even getting this stuff from? Witchcraft isn't even referenced in the Bible. There's polytheism, there's paganism, but there's nothing like witchcraft. Anyway. I need some version of reasonable spirituality. And when I hear verses like this, they just rub me the wrong way because it sounds like someone's asking for my blind allegiance or else. But that doesn't convince me of anything. Give me all your money. Why not? Or else. I'll take or else. Let's see what you got. You know what I mean? Let's see what's going to happen. Oh, I got a gun. Oh, you got a gun. All right. That's compelling evidence. I'll roll with that, Right? You got a knife? It's depends how feisty I'm feeling. But you got a gun? Okay. Unless you're standing too close to me. But if somebody just says, do this or else, I'm always or else what? You'll go to hell forever. I don't know, man. What's the evidence for that? I got it. What's the evidence for that? So this kind of demands for fealty sans any evidence rub me the wrong way. If it's Krishna or if it's the Bible, it doesn't really make a difference. I'm not inspired by it because it's the beginning of fanaticism. It's the beginning of the loss of any kinds of checks and balances. It's the beginning of madness. Why were we given a mind? Why were we given intelligence if we have to renounce those things in order to believe in God? So, the ignorant and faithless persons who doubt the revealed scriptures do not attain God consciousness. They fall down. For the doubting soul, there's happiness neither in this world or the next. I want to unpack these verses and rescue them from the fate of being low-level, Christian-esque, fear-mongering demands for fealty. I want to rehabilitate these verses and see if there's some way to appreciate them where they don't just become demands for obedience. You follow? All right. Shraddhavan labhate jnanam. Shraddhavan labhate jnanam. Become Shraddhavan labhate jnanam. The faithful person achieves knowledge. Shraddhavan means a person who is endowed with Shraddha. Shraddha means faith. It means to place your trust. Shraddha, to place your trust. So that thing that you are faithful to is the thing you place your trust in. If you don't place your trust in some thing higher than yourself, then you're not going to elevate outside of this world. When we look at consciousness as a piece of evidence for the existence of the soul, I think it works quite well. It's something you can objectively look at. It's empirically observable. It defies a material explanation, and I think it makes a very strong case for it being an irreducible facet of reality, a quanta of existence. A quantum of existence. That said, at a certain point, you have to have a hypothesis which is reasonable enough, or even an experiment which is reasonable enough, that you begin to follow it in your own life. Like if you go to a women's circle to discuss purpose, or some such thing. Or you go to Landmark, or you go to college. There's some trust. If I go to college, I'm going to get a decent job. There's some trust. If I make this app, I'm going to be successful. It's worth my time. There's some trust. I marry this man, and we're going to make a life together. There's some trust. I'm going to take initiation, and this is going to please Krishna. There is no version of reality where you simply live your life with concrete evidence being given for everything, and there is no sense in which you step into new territory and you try something new which challenges you. There's no version of love where the guy, he simply earned my trust and I don't have any faith in him whatsoever, and I'm not willing to give him a shred of credit. He simply just earned my trust. And the moment anything goes wrong, I'm going to throw him to the curb. It doesn't work like that. Life doesn't work like that. You get a hypothesis, it makes enough sense. You do an experiment, you get enough of a response. And you start to use that thing in your life. And you try it out. And you see how it works. There's no version of anything that doesn't involve this. No one, I knew it was going to be absolutely fine when I had a kid. Like, then you're an idiot. I knew that my business was 100% going to succeed without any problem. Then you're an idiot, because everybody does pre-mortems these days, where they assume their business failed and work back so they don't get blinded by optimism. Everybody fails. Everybody fails. I was just watching Shaquille O'Neal, who invested in Google because he's brilliant. Shaquille O'Neal, like this big, 7'4", 320 pound, beast of a man. How tall is Shaq? Tadeo? 7'2". 7'3" or 7'2"? 7'2". Kareem was 7'2", but he was skinny. Shaq was 7'2", but he was really, really big. Yeah. So Shaquille O'Neal's like, oh yeah. They said, was that your first investment? He goes, no. People come to me like, hey, give me $100,000. I'm going to make some like jackets with like a logo on them, and they're going to be real popular. I made a bunch of investments like that. And he said, but then this thing happened. He wouldn't be on the Wheaties box because he didn't eat Wheaties. He ate Frosted Flakes. He's like, I can't do it. They offered him the Wheaties. He said, I can't do it. But he heard about Google, and he's like, that makes sense to me. And he invested in it. There's no way you could know for sure. There's a bunch of like billionaires who didn't invest in Google or didn't invest in Square, didn't invest in PayPal, were given the opportunity, and they lost out. And they're like lamenting, I could be 50 times, or like a billionaire. I got $50 billion now instead of one. Everybody's got a couple missed opportunities. Everybody like went for a couple that were like bad. Every relationship has its rocky points. Everybody makes mistakes. You want people to have faith in you, you're making mistakes. There's no such thing as a sure thing in this world. This world is not a sure thing. There's variables you can't control for. There is no version of reality where everything is just 2 + 2 = 4. Then you're just doing arithmetic. You're not doing any higher level stuff. At a certain point, Krishna's done enough to earn our trust. Like in a business deal, where you develop enough trust in the person. You have a hypothesis, you do a few experiments, they work out, and you have more trust, and then when the next experiment comes, you're ready for it. When the next investment comes, you're ready for it. There's no loving relationship. Love means trust. Love means faith. We have to have a faith even to have a loving relationship with another human being. Anything requires some trust. There's always unknown things. There's always the future. There's always variables. There's always stuff you can hang your doubts on. A quote I like, you want to never be criticized? You want to never be criticized? Say nothing, do nothing, be nothing. You follow? So when Krishna says here, if you have faith, you attain knowledge, he's simply pointing out to the fact that it's not simply paint by numbers. It's not simply that you don't have to put any skin in the game. It's not that you don't have to invest anything. You have to also invest your heart. That's part of the equation. Krishna's labored in almost pre-theism for 4 chapters to earn our trust. He's built on a solid foundation of evidence of consciousness being non-material, of looking at the nature of reality. Even your faith in the Constitution. Why is the Constitution right? Any deductive logic, which is always stronger than inductive logic. Deductive logic works from broad principles to small instances. All men are mortal. Socrates is an instance of men. He's a man, and therefore he's mortal too, just because all men are mortal. It's inferential, but it's deductively inferential. There's inductive logic. There's also adductive logic, based on limited evidence, and conjecture based on limited evidence. But in inductive logic, you work from the specific to the general. That one drop of water is salty, therefore the whole ocean is probably salty. Deductive logic is much, much more powerful. It's much more certain. Inductive logic, you end up with strong and weak arguments. Deductive logic, you end up with valid and invalid arguments. Deductive logical arguments are necessarily always true or necessarily always false if they're properly constructed, if the premises are true. Inductive arguments are either strong or weak. They aren't valid or invalid in the sense that they are not 100% certifiably true. Life is inductive. Why? Because how do you figure out that all men are mortal? You view a bunch of individual men and you see they die, and at some point you've done enough of that and you can go, hey, all men are mortal. Effect, cause. You work from the effect back to the cause. We say cause and effect in English. In Sanskrit they say effect, cause. So to point out that you have to place your trust, and that's part of the equation, I think is eminently reasonable. And Krishna's not asking us for more than anybody else is asking for when they ask you to make a substantive investment in something. My son's like, I don't want to get initiated because I see some people get initiated, they fall down. I'm like, yeah, a lot of people fall down. He's like, yeah, I don't want to fall down. I'm like, yeah, you shouldn't fall down. He's like, I want to be absolutely sure I'll never fall down before I get initiated. I'm like, it doesn't work like that, Chief. You have a little faith in yourself. But like, well, how would you be absolutely certain you're never going to fall down? What does that look like? And how are you going to get there without a guru? It's like I got to be absolutely clean before I get in that shower. Your guru bets on you. You bet on your tradition. You bet on investments. You bet on every relationship. You bet on your college. You bet on your degree. You bet on your constitution. You bet on the goodness of your fellow man. Hey, what time is it? You know? There's no version of reality that doesn't involve having some faith. 2 minutes? Oh my God. This is just for Instagram though, right? Has it been consistent the whole way through? I'm going to wrap things up for Instagram. Therefore, I don't think it's wrong for Krishna to ask for our faith, our trust at this point. Are you raising your hand? Good. Okay. Shadavala bhate jnanam tatpara samyatindriyaha. You have to control your senses. You have to be dedicated to that. And you have to place your trust in it. What? To the process of yajna, so it can work magic in your life. Jnanam ladva param shantim. After you achieve that knowledge, you'll become incredibly peaceful. Supremely peaceful. Achirena adhigachati. You will go to that place where you're supremely peaceful. You'll become supremely peaceful. Achirena, like not after a long time, very quickly. That also tells you what results to expect. You get told there's an experiment, and here are what the results are going to be. Here's how you can judge the veracity of the experiment. Here are what the results are. So I think Krishna's setting up a very, very standard experiment. The next one. Agyas cha ashradhanas cha. Those who are ignorant, who don't have any faith. Samshayatma vinashati. Who are just like, their nature is that they're always filled with doubts. Those people are ruined. We all know people like this. They're paralyzed, paralysis by analysis. They never do anything. They're always missing the boat. They never jump. If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. So, it's a lyric from Rush, from a band called Rush. If you choose not, it's from a song called Free Will. Are we done?
2 seconds.
All right. Thank you guys on IGTV. I'm sorry I went off on a tangent.